All right, I'm going to officially start the meeting. So this is a special called meeting of the Flood and Erosion Control Board, April 30th, 2 p.m. And we have one main agenda item that we'll be talking about, which is to discuss the new 2024 Master Flood Erosion and Resilience Plan, RFP. I'd like to just go around the room and have everyone state their name for the recording. This is Becky Bunnell, Chair of Flood and Erosion.
Dick Mahusky, Secretary.
Charles Abercrombie, member.
Oprah Brian, Recording Secretary. David, if you could just say your name and role.
Sure. David Murphy from Resilient Land and Water, serving as consultant to the town on this effort. Okay.
And Bill Hurley will be joining us, but is not here right now. So let's just conceptually start the meeting and talk about what we want to accomplish. My goal in today's meeting is to review the draft RFP that we shared with you. I had printed out a version with your comments so that we all have it in front of us right now. But I have some other questions beyond that too. So I don't know if the easiest way is just to kind of go through this with your comments. My bigger picture comment is, what would be, is this a flow of an RFP that you think is helpful? Or do you think we should change some of the sections or orders? Is there a different, ABC numbering and approach that would make it easier for a consultant to provide us a very thoughtful, thought out proposal?
Why don't we start with the big picture questions and we can get into the details later. So that's a good way to start. The question that you just posed. Do you have others you want to throw out there, or is that it for now?
That was the main one for me. I have some secondary ones that are more housekeeping at the end that we'll talk about, such as where we want to host all of the documents that once we select a consultant, they're going to need to review, whether that's on the flood and erosion site, the engineering site, but those are housekeeping, and I don't think we need to really talk about those now.
Okay.
The other big picture item that I'm thinking about is that our new master plan needs to be aware of / dovetail with the POCD.
Oh, actually, that was
to that end, the POCD is in I believe it was February 24 iteration now, and that's before plan and zoning. And I have been remiss in not putting my comments to that in place, but we should make comments on that POCD that's on the table now, anticipating what our master plan might be. And
I agree with that. The comment I would add to that is that we did provide a document to Emmeline and the commission, and I would say that 90% of our comments were not accepted.
Correct.
So I don't know if that means they rejected them or just didn't.
There you go. That's unclear whether it was rejected or not considered. Those are two separate things, I believe.
Yeah. So I think we do owe a second pass and maybe a meeting. I think it needs to be more than a meeting versus just sending a document.
Well, we can speak on that too. As you know, I was working with FHI and the POCD, but I don't want to get off your agenda if that's part of this, then we can talk about that.
I think it is part of it, because one of the things that we were struggling with, is the structural, a couple of the structural premises of the POCD resilience section were surprising to us and felt discriminatory, frankly. And so we wanted to understand if that was going to stay in the POCD, why, and what was the thinking behind that. And I think if I could sort of summarize what the issue was for us, is that it looked like the town had been broken up into sections, and certain sections were able to get individual funding for projects plus town funding for projects, and other sections of the town weren't allowed to get any town funding for projects, and all the funding had to be done by individuals. And there was no rhyme or reason behind that we could figure out, and it just felt discriminatory. Why not just have all sections of town be able to access town funding and individual funding? So if there was some thinking behind that you could share, that would be helpful for us, because we didn't really understand it, and it didn't seem.
I can. And I think I received those comments, gosh, that was probably more than a year ago, because I think this thing has been sort of on the shelf for a while, is my understanding. I haven't heard a thing from Emmeline or from FHI on it. But the resilience section of the POCD was meant to be overall a positive statement. So I don't want to get on the table. Anyone reading it should feel positive about the incorporation of resiliency. And the main thrust of it was to make sure that there was a recognition of the resilient hubs, these areas that would be protected at all cost. And the town services would be there, shelters would be there, cooling centers would be there. They would not be allowed to flood. Every effort would be taken to make sure those were resilient. And then the corridors, which would run between them into other areas of the town. That was the main focus of it. And then
that was important, to be honest. That made sense. Although it seemed like the hubs were 100% business districts, and we weren't protecting other parts of the town. We were just protecting the business commercial.
Well, they were mostly
the cooling centers weren't necessarily in them.
Yeah, and they started as where the critical facilities were most readily found. So wherever there were clusters of those, but I think so outside of those areas, the hubs and the corridors are all the other parts of the town, and we know, and I think you know, and I hope everyone understands that the town can always use public funding anywhere in the town, but it was to try to funnel more of the public funding into areas like Rooster River, where the flooding is life-threatening, whereas along the coast it's sort of kind of more predictable. We're able to sort of manage it better. We have a better understanding of coastal flooding. And so just trying to direct resources, and frankly, the town is already doing that. You put a lot of effort into Rooster River type projects, the detention basins, but it wasn't meant to exclude use of funding in any one place. It was always going to be possible anywhere, but it would sort of encourage people in some areas to use their own resources in addition to waiting for the town. That was the gist of it. And so if it didn't come across that way, I think we should try to make it come across that way, that the town can always use its funding anywhere. And it's just that in some areas it should be really more urgently addressed than others.
Yeah, I think the reason we were sensitive about it was that our understanding is that when something's in a POCD, you can use that to apply for grants. And so it's very important to be careful with how you frame POCD comments, because if it's not in the POCD, if it's overtly left out of the POCD, you then can't get a grant for that area. So our issue was not that we didn't want to direct fund certain places. It was that we didn't want to close down grant opportunities. And we felt the language in the POCD was closing grant opportunities down.
There is a little overlap, and I know David's familiar with this. The POCD and the hazard mitigation plan, same situation. The hazard mitigation plan, you want to make sure you list it so that it's eligible.
Yes, exactly.
So the question is stuff in the hazard mitigation that's not in the plan of conservation development, or vice versa.
We should have them all in both. My feeling is we should open every grant opportunity possible. Why close anything down? And that was closing something down. So that was really our issue. It was a grant-driven comment, and it felt like there was no need for it. And we couldn't understand what the rationale was. Why close it down?
And the other was, and forgive me, it was a couple minutes late. I can't run over, though. Doctor said I got to walk, not run. The heat islands or whatever is probably why it was mainly on the urban. With the resiliency, you had flooding, which obviously we know the areas of flooding, and then the heat islands, and they tend to be where there's more impervious surface, and those tend to be, it wouldn't be a heat island in a half-acre zone. It would be in a tight, dense area, mainly our business districts.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to make sure it included cooling centers and safety centers. Like if you had to evacuate in a hurricane, you would need to go to some place that would be an evacuation center. So it didn't immediately look like it included that. It felt like very business oriented. So if you're saying they are broad enough to include the key schools that we've designated as our evacuation centers and our cooling centers, then I'm fine. It didn't read that way to me, but I maybe misunderstood that.
Well, there may be a mapping aspect of it too that I'm not, is not visible to me. So for example, the downtown Fairfield Resilience Hub is meant to include the businesses, but it also goes across the train tracks and across 95 to the school campus, which a person wouldn't normally necessarily draw a circle that large. So we did try to include some of those kinds of assets. But I haven't looked at it in a year. I think it has been that long. So, right, Bill, has this thing been bouncing around for a year now?
Yeah. Both of them have. Yeah. POCD and then Hazard mitigation.
On the
Well,
hazard
we have
mitigation,
hazard mitigation is August.
I was gonna say.
We have to get that done for the
Yeah.
Metro Cog in August, so we
Right.
have to do ours, I guess, probably. Do we have one scheduled even, a session? Pre,
Well, I know we had one at the library.
we had one in the library with Metro Cog, yeah.
6 months ago, 4
But
months.
it wasn't
ago.
as specific as the ones we've done before with. Anyway.
and that's really,
We're-
so
we're on top of it, though.
the hazard mitigation plan, I wish I could say that it sets policy like a POCD, but it really isn't. It's a list of projects. And so you just want to get everything on your list, right? And so the art of the hazard mitigation plan is making sure you can show FEMA how it's not all going to happen at once. And if it doesn't happen, why it's not going to happen, break things into pieces. But that's just all the nuance of the list of projects. But I would always say, list everything in the hazard mitigation plan that you think you want to possibly start to take away out of the next 5 years, because we see interpretations change. There was a time where generators were not eligible, and then 10 years ago suddenly they were. So we say put it all in the hazard mitigation plan.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you have to list every segment of what's coming up. You could list, you could put placeholder actions in there. We do this all the time. So it'll say things like, for this plan that will be finished in 2025, choose 3 of the projects and pursue those. And that's okay. FEMA allows that.
Okay, well, that's good to know too. So we should make sure that we put in the hazard mitigation plan a certain number of these projects. And if we
Yep.
can say we'll choose 7 of those, whatever they are.
Right. Exactly.
The other big picture thing that I don't think we necessarily need to put in the RFP, but I think we should just talk about how we want to address it as part of the project is, it's obviously, when you think about all of the different kinds of resilience options you can do in town, I mean, Army Corps split up, 9 different sections in the coast. Then we've got Rooster River, we've got Mill River, we've got downtown, we've got underpass, we've got, all these different parts and things. And some, we've already started some of them. And so I don't know if we need to recognize that in the RFP necessarily, but we've done wastewater treatment, for example.
Yeah.
We are hopefully going to possibly get state funding for downtown infrastructure. I don't know if we will or not, but I think we were going to put it on the table to Chris Murphy and hope he might fund that.
He had a meeting the other day.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know if
they brought it up to him, so.
I don't know if that'll be funded, but that would be nice to get that one knocked off. Rooster River is at least the detention basin, and the other work we're doing is sort of funded. So I think we need to recognize that certain pieces are funded, but there's a part of this plan that I'd like the consultant to help us with, along with obviously the town, is prioritizing the rest of them. In other words, if we had to, if wastewater was obviously critical, it was critical that we harden that. How would we then, if there end up being 17 projects at the end of the day in this, I'm making this up, how do we prioritize those 17? What is the method of prioritization, and could a consultant help us, or does that really have to be done by the town? And how would we structure the types of criteria that would allow us to prioritize them? I don't know if you've ever had to do that before, or what that is. It loss of life? Is it,
That would be the flip side. Yeah, critical facilities, loss of life, yeah.
Right. Or
and I don't know that we need to put that in in the RFP necessarily, but if we want them to help us do that, maybe
yeah,
we
I
do.
think you should suggest it. I think it's a good idea. So a consultant can help you strategize a little bit about some of the things that you just mentioned, critical facilities, but also if there's a project, an area, and when I say the word project now, I mean in one area, so a geographic extent. If there's a project that will influence another one nearby, that one should be done first, right? So an example would be in I don't want to use Stratford as an example much today because they're so different in so many ways, but they're pursuing the flood wall around their wastewater treatment plant, but it's going to be part of a larger effort, and they know that and they expect that, and so flood walls will split off to the north and to the southwest from there. You don't have the exact same situation, but you could, right? If the wastewater plant was a little bit further to the east, maybe it would be part of something. So to the extent that a project could be part of another one further along the way, like in Stratford, then the consultant can help you prioritize the sequence.
Okay. Those were my sort of bigger picture questions. The other bigger picture question is more around you helping us shape this RFP based upon the types of things that you might be aware of or could help us figure out that other towns are doing. So for example, we might not have something in here that you think is really brilliant that Stratford's doing, or that, Guilford is doing, or someone else is doing. Is there a way that you could help us? I've tried to go online and look at some of the plans that are there, but not everything is always posted on their websites. And you might have some insights into things that I don't see.
Let me ask you I'm going to try to get a little bit of your vision for this beyond what's on the page that I've already looked at. So, for example, the town of Provincetown just had an RFP out. I think I shared a copy with one of you a few weeks ago. And and I actually responded to that because it's the kind of thing that I do. But my approach was very applied in engineering, which you would not be surprised if you knew me. And I said, you should focus your resources on putting together realistic options for small businesses and for historic resources, because that's what the town is made up of. And in the end, they went in a different direction. They hired a firm called Scape, which is known for a lot of the New York City East River type work. You guys have all seen the really flashy graphics that Scape has done for the East River. And if you haven't seen it in 2 seconds, you can find it online. And so that's a landscape architect. So they went in a different direction for what they wanted to do. And I think you might all want to decide what are you trying to portray? Do you want something that's very engineering? So like Bill Hurley and I would put it together in our spare time on the back of an envelope, or do you want a lot of really great graphics from landscape architects? Or do you want neither of those things? Do you want Race to come in and do iterations of modeling over and over and design criteria? So like, what's your vision really?
I'll start, but I think I'd like to actually hear from the group here and Bill and everyone, just in terms of what my vision would be to take a town-wide look at all of the places where our town is going to be at risk for flooding, for erosion, for big storm kinds of impacts, and come up with a series of mitigation measures for every single section of town, and some level of costing that would then allow us to sit down with the town and say, what is it we as a town want? And I believe very strongly that that has to be done in conjunction with residents. There have to be public meetings. We have to, like, for example, some consultants over time have said, oh, we should raise the Pine Creek dike 4 feet. That would make sure that it's all out. And the residents would say, absolutely not go on there. So I don't want to do this in a vacuum. To me, this has to be an incredibly iterative process where we come up with some conceptual ideas, take it to residents, talk back and forth, see if there's other ideas, take it back and forth, so that whatever we end up with has relative town buy-in, I'll say. It doesn't do us any good to put things on the table that are going to have major opposition to them. Yep. So I want this to be I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say it's a resident. I don't want to say it resident approved.
No, support.
Yeah. I just want them to have had a chance to input and share and acknowledge. So to me, given that a big part of your audience for this is residents, you're going to have some level of what I would call eye on the street graphics, something that would allow them to envision what a wall might look like along a street, or a lot of people don't have the ability to envision something based on words on a paper. Yeah. So I do think there has to be some level of graphics. It doesn't have to be flashy, but it has to be to the point where you can kind of envision what would a dune look like in front of our house, or what would a riparian buffer be if I were to take a section of the stream and do that in my backyard. How much of my backyard would I lose? What would that look like? And is that worth it to help protect a neighborhood? And so I think that we have to have some level of graphics. Again, I don't need it to be super flashy, but I do need someone to be able to envision the solutions.
Okay, so just before you move along, pass it over to the next person right off the screen. Sorry about that. I can't see everyone. I can see most of you, but I would summarize what you're saying is you don't want landscape architects to come in and make it their own thing. You want this to be realistic, covering all of the town. Some areas will get more attention than others in terms of what the design is or what the description is, but you need it to be sort of applied and implementable, and it's not to be driven by landscape architects. Okay, gotcha.
That's my vision. Now let's go around because other people might have other.
Do you have only one screen that you're looking at? And is that my bald head or my? No, because there's a back camera back there, and there's a camera up there.
Right, I do see the back of you, but there's another view. So there's
that's the one right at the table here.
Well, you can shut that back camera off if you want.
I can probably switch it on my end. Let me see if I can change them and make one of them.
That back one doesn't do much.
Dominant view.
Oh, because we're not all with it. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, we did. All right, there.
Now it's the back of my head.
So now it doesn't matter. At least you can see that there's more people.
Can I have my pink?
Okay, so if I shut the back camera off, do you see us now with the other camera?
No, unfortunately, I see a big black screen. Yeah, so I don't know.
Keep the camera on, and we'll just.
Is there a control there to what camera gets?
I think it's in his. I think he has to do it.
Just you might have to turn that one back on now.
Turn it back on if you can, and then we'll just. We'll just have to look at the back of our heads.
But and I can change the.
There we go. Now you got everybody though.
Let's see which way am I not there? No, I'm good.
So
I changed my view to make all the squares the equal size. So we're good. Keep going.
So you see two views from our room now?
I do, yeah.
All right, there we go. All right, so that was my vision of what I'd like at the end of this process. Bill, what do you envision and what would you like to see at the end of this process? We'll just go around.
Well, we have talked about trying to put all the, and we have it in their agreement or the RFP here with David is trying to put everything into one plan if it was possible. Obviously, I mean, we have the whole list. There were like 8 different plans here. And not have to necessarily put everything in, but at least the highlights certainly should be put in for that, and any conclusions or anything like that. So that was one of the things. The other, like you mentioned before, is maybe either highlighting the differences or trying to somehow combine the POCD, hazard mitigation plan, and then maybe even former components of the 2015 plan that we have, and then maybe even some conservation highlights or whatever. And like, even if you don't specifically list all the neighborhoods, like I said, if you have a graphic or a riparian buffer, then that would apply to anywhere there's a stream.
If you can take a mill river, yeah, exactly.
Then that kind of extends the master plan. And then I'll have to be honest with you, I have to look at some of the notes that we had when we met.
Well, we want a financial component to it too. We want to understand a do nothing scenario in terms of what if we did nothing in 2050 and in 2100, what would be the impact to the town? I think that's really important for us to have that as a cornerstone of this. And then what would be the mitigation if we did all the mitigation we're proposing, which we may not be able to.
Listing mitigation.
We may not be able to afford, but if we did it all.
Other things keep in mind too. Obviously, we were talking about grant possibilities, but then unfortunately for us, FEMA usually wants, if not 1, 2, or 3 feet above the 100-year flood,
which we just
and that really makes it hard. We were trying to come up with, I can't even remember, for Penfield, did we agree to 25 or did we try to get the 50?
We did.
Elevation 11?
We ended up at the 25, which was basically, we ended up with 12-foot elevation.
Elevation.
And that was, I'd have to look back, but that was maybe even the 50 without sea level rise.
Right.
It could have been, yeah.
50 without sea level rise, 20 year with sea level rise.
I think.
It was close. I think one was 11.9.
11.8 and 12.2 was the same number.
Exactly. So, so that was, we, try to incorporate that and what impacts that would be. Becky mentioned the financial plan. Obviously, that's going to be big. And then really, obviously we know, I guess you'd have to have like an introduction in the master plan of all the vulnerable areas. and the different types. We would want them. And then somewhere, whether it be the summary or conclusion, maybe short-term and then longer-term solutions if it was possible.
Okay. Okay.
You know, because as I said, just going by with the GZA study, even just doing a benefit cost analysis, they kept on running into basically, I won't say negative numbers, but certainly numbers well below one. Yeah. And then there was even one, well, how do you benefit, you know, this, or if the road floods but doesn't damage anybody, or if homes, then you can't incorporate that. And unfortunately, that study, which I guess is still just a shade finished before finishing, really, you know, we were hoping that it would show that we can break it up, the Army Corps of Engineers study, but it really showed that there's just so many areas of penetration that it's an all or nothing situation. If you think about it, it's almost like a dike. If you have a dike that's supposed to be 2,000 feet long and you only do one 1,500, the water's just gonna go around. And so, but we were hoping there were a couple of isolated high spots to tie in and at least protect the neighborhood that way. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that's some of the envisions, and certainly we can put more together if need be. If you want.
I think it does need a certain level of street level view graphics to show people what the situation could be. I think that the meeting we had with the South Pine Creek area residents on raising the existing dike another 3 feet, 4 feet. It was an engineering study that made sense, and the group there was moved to reject it by the guy who stood up and said, well, I was standing on the dike, which is at the back of my property, when the storm was at its maximum, and I still had 6 inches to go before the water was going to come over the dike. And they would not, and I don't know how well it was presented, but the facts were that the wind shifted 2 hours before high tide, and the water no longer kept rising in Long Island Sound. It kind of stayed the same and then started going down and out. And the fact that Sandy was not a hurricane, it was not a Cat 1 hurricane. It was when it got into Long Island Sound, it was just a strong nor'easter. And I don't know, people just thought this was the stupidest idea. Whether they thought that because they couldn't envision how they could get from their backyard over the now higher hump with a 3-foot concrete wall atop it to get to their dock, their creekside veranda, their boats. I don't know, but to me,
a nice little picture of a beautiful little steps.
Yeah, right. Ramp up, ramp down. So,
yeah. Okay.
So now, graphics and selling the concepts are important.
Okay. Good to hear that.
Oh, Carolyn Cameron joined us. Oh, Carolyn.
Do you have any more, or should we go on to check?
No, I mean, it's just the dovetailing with the POCD, I think is important.
Okay.
My view of what we should be trying to accomplish is really twofold. One, I think we need to recognize that although public education is really important, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you end up doing nothing for reasons along the lines of what the experience Dick just outlined.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand, the scope of the problem, number one, so as to alert them that a do nothing approach is not the way to go. But yet coupled with that, I think needs to be the practicality of two things. One, there have been many studies, a lot of information is out there. A lot of it is beyond the layperson's basic understanding. So I think it's important to use these prior resources to try to come up with what are very practical solutions and not just start over again. I mean, for example, this modeling study that Ray just put out, which talks about the coastline from essentially Ash Creek down to the end of the peninsula, strikes me as it could be, obviously it's a very important tool in integrating that into the ultimate master plan and coming up with, it's hard because there is obviously a lot of engineering and there's technical matters that have to be discussed, but at the same time, synthesizing those technical things into practical solutions that can be enacted, as opposed to just putting out a plan that's aspirational.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that. And thanks for sending the race study. I somehow was not aware that was going on or forgot about it, but I did skim it before this meeting.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at their final report. I have to say that I haven't really spent time with their final report. One of the things I had hoped it would have
It wasn't much more than the preliminary.
Yeah, what I struggled with on the preliminary was that they averaged everything. So they'd take a 1,000-foot section and they'd average it. And so the average was 11 feet, but the reality is there's some sections that were 8 feet and some of it were 12 feet. And so it's like, it doesn't really help you understand where to do the mitigation because if half of it's already at a level you're happy with, you really only have, you don't have 1,000 feet, you have 500 feet to protect. So it didn't really help me.
Yeah, I think in their view, you go from that overall to now look at section 3. So what's really in section 3?
No, but they have the data. So why didn't they give us the data? They gave us the averages, which is not helpful. That's all I'm saying. To me, it wasn't helpful. Maybe it is to someone who's looking at the mitigation, but to me, an average doesn't help me. I want to know what of that 1,000 feet is the area I have to really focus on.
I don't want to get you all sidetracked, but you're aware of, most of you, I think, are sort of familiar with the pros and cons of Race's version of modeling versus a different version of modeling, right?
That's why we wanted to open up the idea that someone else might have a different model.
Okay.
That might be better suited for what we're looking at. The other issue I had with Race's model is that I really feel this needs to be townwide. I think we can't leave Southport out. We have to at least look at it, and we didn't really, we didn't look at anything, I guess, to the east. I guess we went up to Ash Creek, so I guess we did cover that section of town.
Yeah, the other way, okay.
The other thing Race's model didn't look at is anyone who does a model, if we want to look at the scenario of what happens in 2100, which by the way, in my initial, I had a typo in the one that you got. It said 2011 as the second one, and Chuck was kind enough to point that out to me.
I thought that's what that was. Okay.
So if we want them to look at 2100, they're going to want to use their same modeling and just change presumably the parameters. We can't really go back and use Race's study. They're going to have to create their own model, I think. But no, I actually don't know enough about Race's modeling versus other modeling. That's not my expertise. So okay. I'm hoping that you can help guide us with what the right modeling should be for what we're looking to do in this plan.
Yeah, I think I can do that. So the race modeling, I'll keep it really quick. So the strengths are that they have the wave dynamics and they can look at the sediment transport. Those are modules they can add on. But the bottom line is the race model starts with the FEMA stillwater elevations. So they're pulling the FEMA stillwater elevations out of the FEMA flood insurance study, and that's the boundary condition. So all the dynamics is happening kind of on top of that. And that's not bad. Those stillwater elevations in the FEMA flood insurance study are based on real gauge data. So they're based on real data. They're not made up, but the race modeling depends on those and uses those to start with. Whereas if you pull in someone who's doing the AdCirc modeling, or like what Circa does, my former colleagues at Circa, they're running ocean dynamics that build the stillwater elevations for the model and then use those for the results. So they're not using the FEMA stillwater elevations, they're sort of building their own. It's just two different approaches. And so I think what's good about what RACE does is that it's relatively nimble and they've got the sediment transport aspect. They can look at erosion, whereas Circa can't. So, when you get down into this, you'll have to sort of decide what's more important. And if you want to have all of it, it'll just cost more.
So we had gotten the University of Rhode Island in to do a proposal, and they were going to get a boat out and do time-bound measurements, sort of a fall and a spring, to really understand the seafloor slope and how that would impact the wave dynamics. And is that the kind of thing that Circa would have been doing then?
No, I don't know, they wouldn't be. So Circa is going to be there. They've got a variation of the AdCirc advanced circulation model that the Army Corps has, which looks at the whole North Atlantic and when storms come up the coast, and or whether it's a hurricane or a nor'easter, what that does to water levels on Long Island Sound. So they have a variation of that. So it's more focused on making sure that the still water elevations are correct in the first place. Whereas RACE is just, again, using the ones out of the FEMA study. I don't know which approach Rhode Island would be doing. Now, if they're measuring bathymetry, that's to help with the wave aspect. But it's hard to know what they're using as their baseline boundary conditions as still water.
They probably had it in their proposal, and I didn't understand enough to know what it is. So I don't know if we need to really get into this, but do we need to specify the modeling in our RFP, or can we have them come back to us with their proposal?
No, I think you should tell them what you want, and then they can come back to it with their proposal. So tell them, for example, we would like to, the kind of thing that you could say is we definitely want to include the wave dynamics, and we might want to include sediment transport, but you might not. So we can talk about that. If you feel like you can take a stand on whether the boundary conditions are from the FEMA study or not, then I would say, put that in there. But if you feel like you don't want to take a stand on that, then you don't need to. They're coming up, the two methods do come up pretty similar in the end. So the more important to say what you want to get out of it, and then they can propose the model that they want to propose.
Okay, what do we want to get out of it in your mind?
Well, let's talk about do you feel like you're really going to do a lot of analysis about erosion, where sediment, the fate and transport of sediment coming from different beaches and bluffs and whatnot? Or is that something that you can leave out of this? What do you think? I know this is
I think we have our engineered beaches already. So, I mean, I guess what I would say is for the close end, we already have a proposed, slope of the beaches that we're going to try to maintain on an ongoing basis. And if the big storm comes and wrecks that, we can, assuming it's a declared disaster, we can recreate that slope again with federal money. So I don't know that we need to necessarily worry a lot about beach erosion.
And then for the individual property owners along the peninsula, that's the second area that we're concerned about erosion. I mean, the first area we're concerned about erosion is the town beaches. And then if you take the private property owners that are directly on the shorefront, that's the second area. I think that basically covers it, because by the time you get into the marina, let's say, you have spits that are protecting that from any direct wave action and large erosion. But it seems to me that until DEEP or the legislature says, we want to let people of means do something below the 5-foot elevation to take the energy out of the waves and prevent as much erosion as would otherwise happen. Or we will let people put a revetment across their property with big honking stones that will not be moved by most wave actions. Mm-hmm. Until that happens, I don't know that we're going to be very effective.
Okay.
In their coastal permitting session at the fire training, were you there?
No, I was.
Yeah, they said we could do intermittent breakwater living shoreline types of things in the private area. They pretty much said that they would permit that.
All right, so let's leave it
living shoreline. But I think we're diverting right now. I think we're getting into an area.
You also got to remember, though, we presented it at the Board of Education building, the living shoreline, and the impression I got was it was all going to be buried, or it was at low tide and everything's going to stick up and people aren't going to like the way it looks, or there was some there were some issues I remember about that, so.
There was? I don't remember that.
Well, my sense of living shorelines has always been when we have an elevated tide level during a storm, all that is going to be 2 feet under the trough of the wave, that it will not take any energy out of the wave.
Well, no, but that's where that article I sent you, they were lower than they.
Stick up things.
But they didn't stick up. Anyway, I think
Just real quick though, even on all this kind of stuff, if the transport is sediment, you're talking about wave breakers and all that kind of thing, you might recall, that right off the bat might be a $250,000 study if we were to go all over.
Yeah.
If you want to do a cursory study, that might be something that we could possibly include as an ad alternate or something like that at the end, where, it's only gonna be 20,000, at least just give a general, something that we can show the public, then maybe it's worth it, but if it's 250 and all these.
Yeah, I don't want that.
That's what I outprice ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think maybe listing it as an ad alternate.
Okay.
Because I had it in here, but I think we should be very clear that would be an all,
And it would be more like conceptual or very preliminary.
Okay, so I think we tell the consultant in here that they need to describe, well, we've already said it, but we need to make sure they describe their detailed approach to the modeling, what exactly the tools are called, the models they plan to use, and what the boundary conditions are, what they're based on, and then they can tell you and you can select the one that meets your needs. So I can help with the wording of that.
Okay, that would be helpful.
And actually, just going back to that, so we're asking them to submit the proposal, so it could be somebody, the old apples to oranges. We might be getting 2 different proposals, and then we're gonna have to rely heavily on you. Or do we kind of put out, well, here's what we want in our master plan, list something specific, and then they're comparing, But that's something as a group, I think we have to decide.
If let's say that we have 3 people bid on this, and 2 of them do one type of model and one has another type, can we go? And we decide after discussing, we'd prefer the one that the 2 have. Can we go back to that 3rd company and say, if you were to do this kind of model, how would you change your proposal, or is that not appropriate to go back and ask that?
I think it's appropriate, but it's a question for your purchasing agent, right? So I think it's okay. And if I was the consultant responding, I would deal with that and not get all upset about it. But you might want to just check with purchasing.
Okay.
The only way I think they would accept that though, because once the prices are announced, then they know what the other people are bid,
Yeah, that's true.
You would have to see the proposal, don't make the announcement, and then maybe say, okay, you didn't do it this way, what would be, but I have a feeling they're gonna say no.
So maybe we should decide the model up front and then just ask them to use that type of
That
model.
would make it a lot clearer.
So I guess then, David, back to you. How do we decide what is the right model that we should be speccing in the RFP?
Well, I don't want to cut anybody out. I mean, you guys were working with Race already, and you I think get good work from them, right? So I know the modeling that GZA does, what Circa does. I don't know what Rhode Island the team is doing, but if you want to send me that proposal, I'll take a look. What Woods Hole Group does. They've all sort of just have a different take on this. So
Either that, or then after, when we open up the bids, you have to decide, but if you're gonna actually, that would be the other thing. Are we looking at a QBS quality-based selection, or are we looking at proposals and then going by that?
Well, let's actually decide it this way. So we know I think I understand, and you've explained what you want in your master plan. And given that you can get there using different models, what would you say is, because I already know that the race coastal flood modeling is a little bit higher than Circa's, for example, because of the circulation model used. So if you used race's data, it's a little bit more conservatively high, the flood protection systems that you'd be building. Is that okay? Or do you want to pregame this to sort of have something more conservative or less conservative in terms of height? I don't know that we can answer that or that it's appropriate to decide right now, but those are the kinds of decisions that we might want to sort of bat around.
Well, just out of curiosity, so that implies that the FEMA, which is the underlying still water elevation in the race model, is a more conservative number than the one that the circuit uses, which uses the
circulation.
The Army Corps circulation,
right.
circulation, AdCirc, whatever.
Yeah, that tends to be the outcome, is that and let me just get on the table. If you're regulating buildings, it doesn't matter. You're always using FEMA. We all know this, right? But we're not talking about that. So yes, if you're using Circa's modeling on coastal flood inundation and waves on top of the still water, the numbers are a little bit lower than they would be if you were using the race race modeling. Not by much, they're close.
Now, did I hear you correctly that the race model is based a little more on empirical data, and the other models are more esoteric, more scientific, the pure scientific?
I mean, that's one way you could characterize it. Again, the FEMA data is based on gauge data. So it's based on someone taking 100 years of water levels and plotting it and determining the frequency of all the different levels. So that is a scientific method, but the race modeling is based on that, on the FEMA data, which is, you can call it empirical, but it's real data. Whereas the Circa modeling and the GZA modeling is based on modeling of ocean currents and circulation and how that sort of sets up a condition off the coast. And in the end,
things like the bathtub effect or something like that would be more likely to surface in the Circa and GZA model than Long Island Sound creating a bathtub, just because that circulation, we know that happens when you have a storm wave.
Right. I mean, when Jim O'Donnell takes his Circa data out on the road, it always ends up being water levels that are just a little bit lower than what the FEMA flood elevation would be. So it's not a problem necessarily, and it's never an issue if you're regulating building because you're using FEMA anyway. Yeah. But if you're elevating a road, for example, there's a decision to be made about which you use. I think we just, in this RFP, we say, explain your approach, the limitations and boundary conditions you're modeling, and then you can decide.
Is it one more costly than the other, just out of curiosity? The model, I mean, it's all computer program.
Yeah, I think the ocean circulation modeling tends to be more costly. That's my understanding of it.
Huh. There you go.
Well, I mean, what did you just pay race for the modeling that they did? Can you tell us, or?
We can't break it out because it was modeling plus conceptual design. So I'm not sure I don't know how to break two apart. I mean, Bill, you might have a better sense of how.
Well, no, for that one, Eli's been handling that.
Yeah, we could try to find out if we could try to get a breakout of that.
Well, let's not get too hung up on the model.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of have a direction on this. Let's not go in the weeds on that. Okay, so I know you put a lot of comments into this. Do you want to walk us through your comments and we can go through them?
Well, actually, before we leave the modeling, so I think you don't want a firm to come back and say they're doing HEC-RAS modeling of the rivers and PC swim modeling of, you don't want all that, right? So even though you want a master plan for every square inch of the town, you're not expecting the firm to come in and rerun river models, right? I don't think that's not envisioned.
I don't think so, because Rooster we wouldn't have ever gotten out of a model. We would never have gotten that flood event out of a model, and that's the issue. Is that I think.
Okay. They would just use FEMA maps for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we need the rivers remodeled.
So no river modeling.
And no stormwater modeling either. You don't want a grid of depths of water and parking lots throughout downtown, that sort of thing, right? That I think we did that with the downtown study 8 years ago, and there's no reason to redo that, I don't think.
Do we have that data that we can give them, or do we give that data, have those scenarios?
Well, I mean, NOAA Atlas 15 is about to hit the street. It's all there'd be a reason to do it all over again, but I just don't think that. I think that the stormwater modeling, flood modeling looks good. Like the one that Circa just finished with Fuss and O'Neill for Danbury. There's no other way that the downtown flooding could have been described. So it's a nice tool, but I think Fairfield's too big. There's too many areas, and you would lose focus if you tried to do it. So I'd recommend that.
Certainly on that one, I would just say, again, let's get the master plan done. Yeah. And then if the next step or a future step, like we're talking about long term, it might be a deeper dive in But
we also have a plan for the downtown that we're already looking for funding for, so it's almost like, why remodel that?
That's what I mean. We know the areas that are flooded. The fact that if a model shows it's going to flood 3 more inches, I mean, doesn't really matter.
You're going to do a bigger pipe. You're still going to do with
Agreed.
it, 6 inches pipes or whatever they are.
So I would keep that out.
Agreed. Okay. All right. And then I think my only other big question was, before we get into the editorial comments, is did you think that you'd be able to draw on a map what the areas are? So, because the more whiny consultants will say, we don't know how many areas and how big they are, you have to show us. So, you know, you've been lucky to have me, who doesn't whine much, just a little bit. But a lot of consultants would say, we can't respond to this unless we know exactly how big these areas are that you're talking about.
I mean, so when you say draw a map, we could take a map of Fairfield and we could say the coastal, here's a blow up of the coastal section. We would expect a deep dive in these 11 sections.
Yeah, I think if you
can do Riverine, we would expect a deep dive in these 6 sections. And in downtown, we would expect, I don't know, these 2 sections.
Is it an area of what we want to study, or is it an area like where it's flooded? I mean, what do you?
Well, I think what they're going to anticipate is that in every one of those areas, you'll want some sort of concept design or plan view of a solution, right? So they're going to count those as individual projects that they put together, and each one will have kind of a graphic or a rendering, or
I see what you say.
It's just a unit of thinking for them.
And if we already have solutions for some of them, for example, like Roof to River and downtown, we may want to say, these are sections we want in the master plan, but we have solutions for these already.
Yes.
So maybe we designate which ones we're asking them to do. And
I think if you
want them in,
what we say is you want to mention all areas, and then you just have like NIC not in contract, or to be done by others, or being done by others, or in progress.
Right, you could show that on a map, or just even in a table. If you don't want to commit to a map, sometimes if you put a map in, then you feel like you're committing a line to a person can look at that and see my property is in or out, and we don't want that. But maybe you could just put a list together or a table.
Yeah, I think we could do a big picture map, and I think what I don't want to do is, even though we know certain things are going to be that we don't really want them to do deep dives on, I do want it in the plan that this is a project that the town is looking at, like downtown infrastructure. I'll just say that. I mean, I don't want, this needs to be a master plan that has everything in it, but they don't need to now do a deep dive in downtown, for example.
I agree. Yeah, I think this is.
And they don't need to do a deep dive in underpass, because you guys have already done that at Circa.
Right, and I think exactly underpass is a good example. And so if you take the underpass study and the downtown Fairfield green infrastructure master plan, or whatever it was called, and put those together, you've got the downtown. So right, I think.
But I want that to be noted in this plan in terms of a write-up. If this is, if we talk about what do we need to do in the town, I want acknowledged that those are things that we are actively looking at.
Right.
Because if they just look at the things they're doing, they're going to leave out the downtown, for example.
Right. After mentioning them within the body of the plan, would it be helpful for future cogitation about this plan to have an appendix that includes these previous studies, includes the whole study?
Well, they'll live on forever anyway, so they could be listed for sure. But I think this is a good idea that you all have all these individual efforts. I think someone always anticipated that after a period of time, they would all be linked back together. And that's what this is. So let's just make that clear then. So I think if we could put together just a matrix or a table of the areas, and then there'll be 2 columns. This column will say work's already been done, include it in the plan narrative. This column would say this needs attention, kind of thing.
Okay.
There's a question with respect to that, and that is, if you're going to list these areas in the master plan, do you need to say what the plan, those areas which have plans in place already, do you need to lay out what the plan is?
Yeah, they'll need to have it. We'll tell them what it is.
but they need to know that they need to include it in the report.
I want it included in the report, but they don't need to.
A little thumbnail description of what has gone before.
Yeah.
I agree.
And what is planned.
My point is, it's not enough to simply say, we already have a plan for this area, so you don't need to attend to it and not say what the plan is. That's
Yeah, it needs to be put, some narrative needs to be put in the actual plan that is the final
the
deliverable.
consultant needs to know that, because it's gonna cost them, it's gonna be part of the price just to put those sentences
Right, but that shouldn't be expensive.
No, it shouldn't be.
I
It should
think
be
it's a
something they should be made aware of.
Yeah, yes.
A good
So
example.
the two columns are.
And a good example of what the consultant will need to do, I'm just trying to think of an easy one, and an easy one means more recently in my memory. So the underpass study is looking at 4 areas that we said in the POCD would be resilient corridors. And so now what's the next step? Well, the underpass study says what to do at each underpass, but it might not say how people should get there from an area that's further removed. That's not part of the underpass study. So this would be a chance for someone to tie it all together. If
Yeah.
that makes any sense.
Well, I also think the other thing is in the underpass study, we actually didn't come to a final solution. You offered 4 different scenarios, one of which was just gates that go up and down, and one to the one where you completely, widen the underpasses and dig down the catch basins, and there were that 16 million versus 1.2 million. So we actually didn't decide which of those to do. So I do think there is some work to be done in that, for example.
And I already said in public to everybody a year ago that what I really wanted was an overpass, and everyone said no. I said,
overpass. I would much rather have an overpass on one of those. But that's even more expensive.
Right.
And again, it's cost benefit. It's for 7 6-hour periods a year.
The gate would be fine.
Do we just get little gates, or have the cops put sawhorses out with clear detour directions? See, go all the way east and go over the railroad tracks, or go all the way west and go over the railroad tracks, and then figure out how to get back to the.
Well, you've met the average driver, Dick, so you know how that goes. It's right.
All right, so we will put together something like that. Let us try and work on that over the next week or so.
And I can help with that too. So whatever you need me to do, just let me know. Okay. All right. So I think that was all the big things.
Okay.
So I can share my screen, although you all have it in front of you. I'll go ahead and do that.
We have it in front of us, but I'm happy to share screen if you prefer.
So yeah, I can still see you and this at the same time. So I'll just go ahead. So do you see this on the wall as well?
Yes, we like this.
Okay, so I'll let you guys drive the speed though. Go ahead.
All right, so we're just going through your comments one by one.
Okay. All right, so we talked about this, how many areas where they're likely to be, right? So we're going to have a table that kind of characterizes where these zones are.
So this first comment was the table, is a request for the table.
Yep.
Okay.
On this part C, so what I started to do here, and I didn't do this for long, I only did this one time, it's just kind of this housekeeping. So try to remember in the climate realm to put flood in front of the word mitigation, because if it's climate mitigation, it means carbon emissions. So we oftentimes just say flood mitigation / climate adaptation, because they're kind of the same thing.
Okay.
So just for people that are responding that get easily confused, that'll be. And then I said here and after known as resiliency approaches, which just takes care of it. So whether or not you want to copy and paste that forward is up to you.
So we should just start using resiliency approaches as our throughout it.
Or just look for the word mitigation and make sure flood is in front of it. That'll take care of it. And then I had no other comments up here. Really, I think.
I actually stop right now and ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you looked at this, and if you were just to put a ballpark cost of what you think the range we're going to get back from consultants of the way this is written today, what do you think the study is going to cost? Can you put any kind of range to it? And just as even a we don't hold it to you. We're just curious.
Yeah, I mean, given the as it stands now, without a table of locations and without a map or any more clarification, you'd be I think you're going to have in the 300,000 range. Firms are going to come back and with a lot of uncertainty and kind of worry about a lot of the
That's
risks.
actually less than I thought. I'm very happy to see that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that actually, because we were asking for things like, in this, two mitigation approaches for each of these sections and some costs, some 30 plus or minus 30% cost ranges. That feels like that ends up being a lot of work for them to put those together. But maybe they just know this.
Well, there's a balance, right? It's going to be a lot of work in some areas, but is the whole northwest corner of town going to be one area, right? Like what are you going to have for that area? In the end, it'll be a little floodplain bench or something, or so they're probably.
I would envision. So right now, let me just take sort of Rooster River flooding. We've got the work we're doing right now with the detention basins. We're clearing out the streams and trying to, get the culverts to have it be a little, so we're not getting all the debris that's clogging culverts and stuff like that. I would envision that we would want to do the next phase in the Rooster River area, which I don't know what it is, but I would envision maybe there's 100 bioswales that capture the water as it comes charging down those streets, or I don't know, maybe that's not the right thing. Maybe there's something else that we would do. So I'm hoping that there will be a phase 2 to Rooster River as part of this plan.
One thing that comes across my mind from time to time is revetments at severe bends in the river to reduce erosion at those severe bends. And that will help silting downstream. It'll help the property owners not lose more of their land to the river.
Mm-hmm. So you'd like to see that could be a depiction for that area that comes
that
out.
That would be one of the things that would be in our chart, for example, a phase 2 of Rooster River. What would be the next? We shouldn't tell them what it is necessarily, but I'd like to hear them what they think would help mitigate more flooding.
Yeah.
Detention basins are only going to do part of it. We know that. What would be the next thing if you wanted to take it a step further?
Well, probably acquisitions and elevations, but there won't be a concept plan for that necessarily. Well, there could be.
It could be that, that's one of the things that we're looking at in the coast is that people are elevating their homes. And if we've got 1,500 houses, let's say, and we've got 800 of them already elevated, that's good.
Yeah.
Could be that, we've actually done a lot of that work, and maybe we put together a plan where we offer to offset some of the costs the way they did for some of the coastal people to elevate their homes in the Rooster River area, or at least the worst ones. Maybe there's 20 homes that are, at huge risk. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Or at least pursue FEMA funding where it's kind of easier to get it along riverine. Well, I say easier, but it's
still a difficulty.
Yeah.
It's 3 years and counting, I think, for the ones that they want near, I'll say the name, Camden Street or whatever. I know Emmeline's been working with them and they haven't given her a final answer. One of the questions I do have, though, when we're even talking about with the master plan, my indication has always been one of the best ways. There's really only 2 ways to resolve the flooding. One would be to hold back water. The other is to put it somewhere else. And obviously, by putting it somewhere else, one of the examples would be is if we have a 4-foot culvert, if we made it an 8-foot culvert, that might help that neighborhood. But now that extra water is going somewhere else. I don't know if that's something that we could have the engineers look at in terms of an area, because then again, it might go back to the hydraulic model.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get hydraulic modeling in this master plan.
Yeah. Not for the amount of money.
How much would hydraulic modeling cost? It would be another 100,000, or would it be like a?
It
just depends. It could be 100,000 per watershed. It could be 100 for the Rooster, 100 for the mill.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's still not even detailed. That's generic. I'll call it preliminary modeling, not even the final modeling.
But do we need to do that ultimately?
Well, it's one of those things where, again, we could at least put it in, list it in as maybe when you talk about phase 2 or something like that.
Phase 2, maybe.
I feel like there's
non-impactful storm.
Mill River corridor I feel like I never hear about a lot of damage, but I feel like it's an area of some low-level anxiety. So if you feel like you can do it someday, but that's a future phase.
Yeah. All right. All right, so let's go back to the RFP then and your other comments.
All right, so I think we covered, so I'm in favor of you having the part A through F sort of laid out here. We might want to, there's some cleanup we can do later, like we might want to add this into saying more detail follows. Otherwise, a panicker who's reading this will think this is all the detail on A through F, and they won't even turn the page. But, you know, that's the kind of thing we can easily fix that later. There's a lot of panicking out there in the consulting world right now when the RFPs hit the street. So background is great. For work, I think I didn't have much here. We talked about this already. So you do want the coastal flood modeling. And I think you do want to be able to view timing of pathways, coastal flood pathways, right? You want to see some timing. Race had that. They had time steps in their graphics.
Yeah.
We don't want the PC swim and we don't want the HEC-RAS. That's for future phases. So I think we've answered this comment.
Now, are you still on a project overview, or did you go somewhere else?
He's now on scope of work. He's on.
Oh yeah, sorry, we're on scope of work.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm just.
Well, did you have any other comments on as we go?
Well, I just want to, when we talked about the coastal modeling, again, Race has done certain sections. Are you talking about other sections, or?
Yeah, you want to.
Their model didn't do the whole coastline. It only did. It didn't do Southport.
Right, you want just all the shoreline modeling.
And it didn't do Cisco. It didn't do anything.
Right.
All right, we're talking about elevation 12 modeling.
Well, that's actually let's talk about the elevation 11 versus 12. So we originally, as a flood erosion control board, recommended 11, and then we got into the Penfield discussion, and the alignment coming out of that was 12 foot. So should this whole modeling be done to a 12-foot resilient? I mean, not modeling, because obviously, but we want to understand, you know,
what mitigation level will we adopt?
Yes, it's more the mitigation level. So I guess if we are doing 12 for Penfield, we could just do that. It's going to cost more, obviously, if you go from 11 to 12, it just adds cost. But how do we feel about that? Do we want to take it up to 12 for the whole site, for the whole plan?
Well, don't forget, if I recall, elevation 11 was only protecting like a 10-year storm.
No, it was protecting a 25-year storm.
But without any.
With sea level rise, I think. 11 did. Didn't it?
Yeah, they seem to all come in around 10.
11 protected sea level, 25. We did 50. It did
50 and 25 with the sea level.
Don't make life impossible for yourselves. Just say elevation 11 to 12, and then they'll have a cost which is the same as if it was just 11 or if it was just 12. The worst case scenario would be you say 11, then you're halfway through the study, you change your mind and you want 12, and they say no, can't do that. So just if you can
tolerate everything says 11 to 12, that would be okay. They wouldn't like have an issue with that.
That's fine. You can do that. Yeah.
So then your kickoff meeting, though, you'd have to decide. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think you can kick it down the road a little bit. I think in here you say 11 to 12, or even 11 to 13. I don't think you're going to go that high.
No, we're
not good. 11 to 12.
Okay, so 11 to 12, right? Because I think you wrote this before this final version of the race report, which I looked at today, and it referenced 12 in some parts of it, didn't it?
We actually switched. Yeah, this was written before the decision to move to 12 and race.
Okay.
And that's why I left it all in red, because I wanted us to have the discussion.
Gotcha. Yeah, give yourself a range. If you say 11 to 12, that's completely fair. Yeah, and I did some
work. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is the race study something that should be exempted from this, or maybe put a different way? The work they've done along Fairfield Beach Road, stuff that just got published, should it be done again under this RFP, or should they be pointed out that they don't need to do it? Because I'm a little unclear as to
I think it's a do-over on the whole shoreline. There's not really a way around it, right? Becky, Dick, is that what you?
My understanding was that it's going to have to be a do-over because race didn't do the whole shoreline and because race didn't do 2100, someone's going to have to recreate the model to do those anyway. And once you recreate the model, they might as well redo the sections that were done.
Right. And if race is the successful bidder, they'll have this already done and they'll build upon it. So
yeah, they'll actually be cheaper because they've already done huge chunks of the shoreline.
Right. Yep. All right. So just to hopefully no one's feelings are hurt, always look for words like feel or felt, replace those. The town believes, right? This is what you believe.
Yeah.
And
I have but by the way, feel free to edit. I am known as having terrible spelling and terrible capitalization, and it is it's sort of a joke in my household. So I have no pride of authorship.
No. I mean, it was correct. It wasn't. I wanted you to. I'm sort of making you sort of like stand your ground. You believe this, and we're saying it. And then the other thing is look for any. This comment isn't in here, but look for any place you use the word all, because that's like a deal breaker for some consultants. I think I caught some of them. Anywhere you say like use all data, just say what you mean if you can do that instead. But anyway, getting back to this. So part B, I think my comment was right, how to show it. What is it, cross sections? Is it renderings? Is it map view? So if you can just provide some clarification, but then I think you do provide that later on. So you might take
pull that clarification into here.
If you could do it in part B, I guess that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Maybe you can say one map view per area and one, I don't know. I don't want to say photo rendering, but maybe that's what I mean, per area.
Most items would be helped by both a plan and a typical section.
Right.
Because we'll be talking elevations, so the section would be helpful.
Yeah. In part C, they kind of both have this. Part B and part C are both suggesting a visual aspect of this plan. So I think you could say it here with part B, or you could say it here with part C. In either way, it's okay. And then this comment here that I made in the margin is just to make sure the map or list of zones appears before this, but we've already talked about that.
Where would that go in? Just out of curiosity, they have to go in the
so
overview?
I was just jumping the gun for a second. All of this next page 3, I was thinking this should all be moved up to the beginning as part of the overview.
Oh, okay.
Well, you're gonna say it for sure. We're not cutting it out. It's important information to have, but I think, like, let me just read one of them. So although preferring passive measures, the town is open to both permanent as well as temporary mitigation approaches, anticipates there'll be some barriers, etc. I think saying that up front in your background section is okay. It doesn't have to be left for the scope of work down here. I think getting it on the table earlier is all right. So that's why I'm saying to move all this up.
So you move it into the project overview section, or in
the
background section was really more just to, if they weren't familiar with Fairfield, the town, it was just to kind of give a sense of who we are as a town, but that wasn't really meant to.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if I was responding, I'd like to see it a little bit earlier, but I would know what to do if it was here. Like it wouldn't cause chaos. It just might.
I'm happy to move things around. If you think it would be helpful to someone who's submitting this, you'd move it. I feel like we move all this in the project overview, no longer an overview. It's now the project.
Well, let's see. If it's moved, part C, part D, how would it flow?
maybe
I have a
separate.
suggestion, perhaps
ahead.
if move the project background, make that 1.0. And do project overview and just include a line right up front that says that each of the below parts will be elaborated on in section 3.0.
Yeah.
Which is the scope of work, and lay it all out in there.
That would take care of it. Yeah.
Okay.
The background first.
Yeah, that's easy. Cut and paste.
Yeah.
Good at that.
So I don't think I have.
And the background is it's fairly generic, so it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any. The list is good. I'm glad you have all this. I don't think. I mean, the next hazard mitigation plan will be out soon, so you can decide whether you want to leave the 2019 or the 2024.
And one of my still to dos, I printed out the contents of our files and documents section that are currently online, and you can link to all of those through our web page. And then this has some things that are not in, just a cursory glance earlier today. This listing on this page has things that are not necessarily in our files and documents. For instance, the Rhode Island proposal that we got, I will send that to you. But that's, I think that's listed in this list. Becky, do you recall what?
I don't think I did put that in there, no.
Okay.
But there are, if I looked at the online files and documents, and I'd say only half of these are in here.
Right.
So should either put them all in
Put
there.
them all in there so that the respondents can look at them on our webpage.
As they're preparing this, yeah.
That's my thought.
I agree with
So that's going to be my task on this, is to get all of these things plus maybe more to our webpage.
Well, but exactly. But I think it's enough to say the MetroCog hazard mitigation plan is on their website, right? As long as it exists somewhere in the world, or the regional framework for coastal resilience. It's on the
links on all of them too.
Yeah, it's on the
actually link to something.
It's on the SCROG website. So whatever you can pass off to others.
I will say that I think I'd asked you for this before. I don't have the most recent underpass study, and on the Circle webpage, it's not the most recent underpass study. It's not the one that was actually presented to us.
Well, is it final? It may not. I mean, I was out of there early December.
I'm not aware of it being final.
Well, the one that was presented to us had numbers in it, and the one that's on the Circle website was not even the one that was presented to us. It was one generation back.
Bill, do you know? Is it?
No, I don't think I've gotten it either.
Okay.
I mean, we don't need it now, but I would like it for this.
I've got to believe it's done, because I can't see that Circle would have extended it past the winter, and it's already April. So, yeah.
I think they just didn't upload.
Well, did we receive a draft, but it's not changed, nor will it change?
Well, the one that they came and physically presented to us in the library, I think it was in the library, is not the one that's on the Circle website, and it's not the one that they gave to us. They gave us one generation before, and the one that's on the Circle website is one generation before. The one that they presented to us had numbers in it. It had the gates. It had 16 million to widen the thing.
I think I was there, so that must have been November or something like that.
And that's not what's on the Circle website. So I think they've done it. I just think they didn't upload it. They didn't upload the most recent one. So we need to reach out to whoever's the right person on that.
It's John. Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I can reach out to John Krasinski.
And I just want that overpass built. Get on it, guys. And so we can show DOT that it's possible somewhere. All right, so I think let me just check and make sure I'm not missing anything. I've got comments later on the hazard mitigation plan. All right, so this sentence, the plan will provide an evaluation and recommended approach to mitigate flooding up and from the catch basins. I don't know if this is something, Bill, that you added.
I added this, but I guess the question is, that is something I'd like us to think about, but maybe I just don't know enough about how can we mitigate the flooding that's coming up from the catch basins? Because it's the whole coastal area that's a big issue in terms of flooding, because we can.
That's part of the tide gate. Kind of if the flap gates close properly and are maintained, that will definitely help reduce some of that.
So I think this is the fix. I think we just replace evaluation with description and recommended approach. Otherwise, you're going to get some pinhead engineer sitting around for a year evaluating catch basins. So unless you want that.
But we have them sitting around for a year evaluating catch basins. So it's ongoing.
All right, so I just changed that to description. I think that'll take care of it. I'm going to just delete that thread.
I have a question.
Yeah.
At the top of page 3, where it talks about the consultant will evaluate and build on coastal resistance measures already in place. Does the RFP need to specifically say which measures are already in place that we want them to incorporate? Or is that something that comes later?
That's what will be in the table in the map.
I think that'll be taken care of with that table.
Okay.
That we're going to make. All right, let me think through this. I think all the rest of this was good. All good things to include. You know, the optional, so whenever the word optional is in here, I would just, if you could, I didn't add a comment for this, but if you could decide whether you want it in or not.
What optional being?
At the bottom of 3C, optional information, there's a project to create a master list of all houses in the floodplain.
So that's actually a question that is it possible to have sort of add-on projects where they give us a cost for the RFP and then they give us a cost for a couple add-on sections? So for example, in this particular one that we mentioned, we had a graduate student come in and do some GIS mapping of our coastal floodplain to understand how many houses are elevated and how many are not. So we understand what we can do a more appropriate financial risk assessment of what we're really talking about here. Because if you've got an elevated house and a storm surge comes through, you're likely to have minimal damage, presumably, except for maybe landscaping. Whereas if you have an unelevated house, that house could be underwater, 5 feet underwater, and you'd have major damage. So we wanted to just be able to have that list, and he never finished it.
Oh, okay.
So we could maybe do that on our own. Maybe I should go talk to John Marsilio and see if he can give me another couple $1,000s to get another graduate student to finish this. But right now, we have a half-assed study, which is useless. So that's why I would have that as an optional add-on. It'd be something they could put some junior person on.
That's the kind of thing you should make me do, honestly. I don't know. Here, David.
Maybe we should. Yeah, if you put a junior person on it, it's pretty easy to do. It's just sitting there with a GIS map and just clicking on each house and seeing whether it was when it was renovated, and if it wasn't renovated recently, then it's not elevated.
Right. I could put Victoria on that and bill her at 110, 120 an hour or whatever, some low rate, if you want to do that kind of thing. And I'm not trying to get work for myself. We're good, but I would say don't add that as an option to this. It just overcomplicates. Okay. Other things you may want to add as options.
All right. This should be Western section, by the way. Second to last bullet.
Yeah, it also says optional. Elevation to all bulkheads in Pine Creek. And
oh, right.
That's another optional. Mm-hmm. So if we want those, the second to last bullet was basically an understanding that we're probably not going to ask this consultant to do a lot with the peninsula, because the peninsula is really just not a very protectable part of our town. It's a sandbar. It's a big sandbar, but I would like to try to help that section of our town minimize the sunny day flooding. And right now, some of the bulkheads are so low that when you just get a high tide, the water flows right onto the street, just without even doing anything, which is ridiculous. And DEEP is making us now do these really low bulkheads. So I wanted to somehow, and that's only going to get worse with sea level rise. So
the town, you've all been talking about this one for a long time. I think this has been something that's been on someone's wish list for a while, more than 10 years. So
we get a lot of comments from residents.
So I think just keep this one in, right? So if we're triaging these optionals, this list of houses is out, and maybe so instead of making this optional, just let's include it, right? Does that sound good?
Well, so that means someone has to pay a surveyor to go and well, I guess you can do it on LiDAR, right? Can you do this electronically with LiDAR?
I think that's the expectation.
Not really, because it's gonna show the elevation near it, but not necessarily if it's the bulkhead sticking up or not.
Right. You don't want to pay for a surveyor, so let's.
Yeah, I would right now, I would take that out.
Take this out and figure out a different way to do this.
Again, that kind of comes into where you're talking about the master plan. If it was only like 200,000, the other idea would have been to do the survey, to complete the survey of Fairfield Beach Road or something like that.
But maybe what we could, and that's why, I don't know, it could be, this is $10,000 to hire a surveyor to do.
It'd be more than that. It's really? That area, it's such detail that you have to go to the front and backyards and all that. It's not just the road. It's
not an easy road thing, okay.
Unfortunately, I do have to go. I have another meeting at 3:30 and 4 that I have to go to.
I think we actually don't have
Dave has his comments listed. I can go through them and
but I think we took care of technical comments, Bill.
So
yeah, you're good.
If there's anything, feel free to send me any partner. Hey, can you decide this or figure this out? Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
That's okay. I think anything that we need Bill for, we can follow up on. So. Nothing else on this list.
On page 4, for all mitigation approaches, there was a section that didn't get deleted that I put in red on our copy, but basically there should only be 3 bullets under for all mitigation approaches.
Yeah, I see. There's a carriage return here or something, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to have been deleted and wasn't.
Okay, so I should it starts here and that's gone. Okay. Are you guys good for part D? Ready for part D?
Yeah, so I mean, this section, the intent of this was to be able to, again, have something, it's really them just doing a recap of all the things a homeowner can do, and in a nice little pager that we can use as an output of this. I can't imagine this takes very long. Some junior person would just put this together. Oh, you can do rain barrels, you can do impervious pavement, you can elevate your electrical, you can, I feel like this is not, I'm not expecting this to take a lot of time. So if this is going to derail them, we could get this done a different way too. But this just feels like a very simple thing that would be a good output that we could give to residents and homeowners.
Well, maybe you make it more specific as to how limited you want it to be. I know you said it's a list, but maybe take out the visual line in the last sentence. And
yeah, I agree.
Short description. Maybe you can get a visual.
This will throw off the consultants. I think. So yeah, about what's needed or what's really wanted.
So how do we say this differently then? Because I mean, this is existing information, and it's something they all could do in their sleep. Is put together this list, presumably.
Right.
We just take it out.
Is it
do it ourselves?
Isn't there some FEMA blurb that already exists that would address this?
Well, this is more like a toolkit, right? But there's already, but you don't want to use the word toolkit because then you'll get $100,000 cost item attached to it. So, why don't we? Let me think on this one.
Yeah, because I don't want this to be as you say, a $20,000 add-on. This is meant to be someone sort of putting together.
We talk about it. Is it really part of the plan going forward?
Well, there's things the town can do, and there's things individual homeowners can do. I want to give some agency to a homeowner that it's your job to help
Help yourself.
yourself.
I'm trying to help you, but.
Yeah, when you're thinking about doing your driveway over, think about maybe it's impervious or
Why not
pervious.
say that, if you leave it in, then say rather than we envision this being a list, it said this shall be a list,
Yeah,
or words to that effect.
Right, and I think we also need to
Shall be
say,
limited to a list with a short description, period.
right, and but you also don't want to, you want this to be optional things, so you don't want someone to get wrapped around the axle over whether or not this is something that happens by the state building code after substantial damage, right? You don't want to, that's not what we're trying to get at. So
no, you're trying to do easy things a homeowner can do to make their personal property more resilient.
okay, so I think what you just said is what we should say.
Okay.
Yeah. So that I didn't write that down, but
I'm writing it down.
okay. Not SDSI, not state building code, etc. All right. All right.
So are we on page 5?
Well, in my version, the bottom page 4 is where E begins.
Oh yeah, so you didn't have any comments on it.
Right. Nope.
So let's just talk about that for a second, because it may not be clear what I'm envisioning from this. So I'm envisioning that one of the deliverables at the end of this is going to be a presentation that we can take to residents that would show in the year 2050 how far sea level rise is going to come up regularly at high tide, and how far it's going to come up with storms, and where homeowners can look at where their house is and go, oh my gosh, my house is inside that area. And that's what I'm envisioning for the 2050. I'm envisioning the same thing for 2100, which is what part E is. And this takes basically, I'm assuming that depending, I know the data is obviously shakier when you get that far out, but this could be, we could be seeing Old Town Hall be underwater in a just a nor'easter, for example.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't ever done the modeling, but that's what I'm looking for the town to be able to sit there and say, in a typical nor'easter with sea level rise in 2100, we could regularly see Old Town Hall parking lot underwater and it being above the steps, and the first floor might get wet, or it goes all the way above Route 1 and on 95 is impassable for certain sections. That's what I'm looking for. Is that what this says in your mind? Is that what you would expect?
It does, yeah. And I think what I like about this is, even though I mostly call for more specific words in most of my comments, I like that this one is a little bit open-ended, because I think it needs to be. So I think you've said it. I think it's good.
Yeah, because that's the goal, is to say, guys, this is a future state, but this could happen and we need to be aware of it.
Right.
The other thing that bothers me, for lack of a better word, all of these flood projections where the land is covered by blue or green or yellow water, they do not take into account any existing mitigation measures we have. Like, we have self-regulating tide gates between Long Island Sound and our major marshes. If those self-regulating tide gates were not there, the marshes would be at elevation 8 during a big nor'easter storm, and all of the properties adjacent to those marshes would be inundated, where today they're not, because the marshes stay at an elevation 3 or 2 or 3.5 or something. Yeah. So I would like to see somehow this report to our residents saying, okay, we are a shoreline community, we're going to be subject to flooding. These are some of the things that these are a few things we have done to mitigate that for you all. These are some things we could do. Now we want to show you no mitigation measures. This is what the 2100 category 2 hurricane would do to our town. With first tier flood mitigation measures, this is what it would do. And I understand the thing about it's all connected, and if there's one breach, it will get everywhere. But I keep coming back to Rick Grauer's analogy of a house with windows, and it's raining like crazy. You got 16 windows, you're going to get 5 gallons of water coming through the windows. If you close half of them, you're only going to get 2.5 gallons of water. So since flooding is a time durational kind of thing, a 50-foot gap will let so much water in during that portion of the tide cycle.
Hour and a half that you'll have it.
Yeah, whatever the timing of that tide cycle is. A 1,500-foot gap will let in 30 times more water. So it will be deeper, farther inland.
Yeah.
So I just keep looking for something to show that, to show those two states.
Yeah.
But isn't that what we're asking for in the scenario, which is the do nothing scenario is what they're going to model first. You have tide, they're not going to take away the self-regulating tide gates because we have those, right? They're going to model the shoreline as it exists today with all the gaps that are there. And however long those gaps are open for, to your point, you're going to have X amount of water pouring in.
Well, that's what. Go ahead.
Then I'm envisioning that when they're going to propose these mitigation plans for each section, they should probably show us a second model that would show a whole lot less water, if any, coming in, if we did them all.
Yeah,
that's what you're asking.
Yeah, and it's almost like the study that was done for the Rooster River. Okay, there's 8 potential storage areas. This one will take out 20% of the flooding. This one will take out only 7% of the flooding. So maybe with each type of mitigation measure, and say, okay, the do nothing scenario has
this amount of water,
12,000 feet of protection, which is land, sand, at an elevation 10. And this measure will take out, I don't know how to do that, but somehow to get a net effect on flooding for each of the mitigation actions.
Right. I don't know if I feel like that's said in here. So that 2 comments. First of all, that's why I asked about timing. I think we decided that you wanted to be able to view timing of flow pathways and whatnot.
Yes.
So the answer is yes. But then I feel like there is a place where we say, or we at least, I hope we say, and not only imply, that they would simulate the proposed conditions. But if it's not said, we should add that.
Well, I'm going to ask you if you could sort of rewrite the model section to capture all these things, because I think you have good language here that makes sense to a consultant, and we might use language that is too vague. But I think you should capture, if you could capture the language around the modeling that gets at what we're asking for, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
But I think the question Dick is asking is, are we going to ask them to show these simulations in a before and an after? So the first thing I would envision we do before and say, here's with nothing, doing nothing, here's where all the water is going to go in 2050 at different storm level and sea level rise.
Yeah.
And then they could show an after, which is if we do all the mitigations that we're proposing, they would run the model again with all those mitigation things in place and say, now here's that same scenario at 2050 with if you did everything. The problem is we're not going to do everything. They may propose, 15 different things, and we as a town will say we're only going to fund 8 of them.
Right.
But then the effect on the overall flooding of each individual item is also a ranking means. I mean, the dollars are the ranking means, but also the effectiveness.
Flooding, yeah.
So you take dollars and you take effectiveness and you mush them 2 together and you get a blended rank, if you will.
Because it could be there's like 3 really low places that are fairly easy to mitigate.
But over the high tide,
but they actually impact a lot, and so we should close those real quick. If you close those 3, it would mitigate the flooding by 52% or something. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense to me. Yeah.
Can you write that?
Yes. Yes. All right.
All right.
So I had some angst about part F.
Okay.
And only because I wasn't sure if you wanted to, so I think the answer is yes. So are you providing, or is MetroCog providing the CAMA data? So that's assessed values of all properties attached to the parcels.
We can provide that, but that's where we get into the elevated property versus non-elevated, for example. That's going to be a very different scenario. If we just provide assessed values without telling them which ones are elevated, they're going to overstate the damage.
Exactly. Yep. And what do you think about this? Do you want to, we can make this real easy and just have it be a spatial analysis without looking at that at all.
No, I want hard data. I want numbers. This is a town that works with numbers.
Okay.
This is a town that if they see that there is 27 million, $1 billion worth of damage, I'm making this up. They're more likely to say, we've got to deal with this. This is a problem.
Yeah.
And if they don't see numbers and they just see, oh, there's going to be some water here, I don't think there's going to be the same motivation. I think this needs to be dollars and cents, because at the end of the day, if our tax base goes down, our grand list goes up for everybody, and it impacts what we can do, and it impacts our how we run our town.
Right. All right. So we should add a little bit more to this about what we expect them to do and what we will give them. So do you want to assume that you'll have that list of which properties have been elevated before this task occurs?
Can you give us a proposal on that? And can that be done as part of this, your front 25? Probably not, right? That's going to be an additional project.
Yeah, it would be an additional project.
Well, I think some of the things that we had in here.
Let it stand alone.
Well, I just can't remember what the scope is even at this point in time. My mind is mush today, but some of them were optional. So if you want to repurpose optional tasks, that's up to you. But let's solve that outside of this. Yeah. Okay. So you want more data here. So town will provide. Okay.
Yes, we will provide it, and we'll have to figure out how to get the GIS piece of it done.
Okay, sounds good. All right, then that takes care of that. So moving on to the rest. So do you want to be, let me ask a question. Do you just want to see lump sum? You don't care what billing rates are, number of hours spent per task, or do you want to kind of see how many hours the different firms are putting to each task? Because you can ask for a full matrix, right? So even if you have a lump sum project, you can ask for a matrix that has hours per task, billing rate, what that number is. In the end, it is just a lump sum, but then you can see how many hours are spent. Do you want that?
I would like to see that, because I've looked at that in other proposals, and I found it interesting where
different firms.
Yeah, where one firm will have $800,000 for temporary piling, and another firm will have $62,000 for temporary piling. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so where did the other $200,000 get allocated?
Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting to see.
So we want to change a little bit of this just to say that. And then I think you still wanted to have meetings be separately listed so you could decide on those, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So then these comments would work just fine for that. So the difference here is we're going to say lump sum fees are requested for all technical and document related tasks. Please show cost buildup, hours, and rates towards these lump sums. Number 2 is the same as what is here. So I need to edit number 1.
Okay.
So I can't type today. All right, good. So the schedule. I want you guys to have easy lives. Was there a
question on 6?
Yeah.
Did we not say hard copies and we just do our own Xeroxing? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's that saying, start with PDFs and go to 5 hard copies at the end.
Yeah, I just decreased it.
Oh, I see. Oh, I'm sorry. I had the wrong.
Yeah,
And
no one's doing copies in
PDFs for the drafts, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, I was surprised. They just did something with Kleinfelder, and they were outsourcing all their photocopying. I said, "Are you kidding me? You have an office in Rocky Hill with a copier?" Oh yeah, we just don't use it. So yeah, okay. So schedule. What do you think? What do you guys think about?
Well, so this is one where I just totally made this up. So let's talk about what's realistic.
All right. Well, first, let's just unattach.
Yeah, the metro card is no longer viable. You're right. That's not a date that we can work with.
Yeah, just let that be. So I think this needs to be a year. I think if you can have this go from mid 2024 to mid 2025, that's better. I think it's going to allow for the things that you want to occur, which is the perception of public and real, actual public engagement.
Okay.
Is there any deadline or statutory requirement that this be done by a certain time?
No, there is a Senate bill that's floating around that hasn't been voted on yet, but I think that's more about adding some more stuff into the POCD than is in the POCD. Have you actually, as an aside for you, David, I don't know if you're still working with Emmeline on the POCD, but there's a Senate bill that Tony Huang sent me about adding things into the POCD. It hasn't passed yet, but if it does, it's going to mean doing some more work.
State Senate?
No, I think you've already, it's so stripped down that if it passed, you'd be set.
Really? We've got all our stuff in it? Okay.
I think you do. Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything.
I remember I don't have it in front of me, but the statute talks about having a master plan published every 2 years.
That's an annual plan.
That's an annual plan. Okay.
Which is not this, although this will become this will be our annual plan, but that's one of a listing of all the projects we're doing and a cost of what we're overseeing,
and how it impacts DEI things or something. There's some.
Is there a DEI in that?
Underserved community. How many underserved communities are involved in?
We do have 3 census districts, three sort of soft census areas that are technically.
Yeah. No, I think the Senate Bill 11 on the POCDs, you're going to be good. They stripped out so much of it, and even if they didn't, you'd be fine. I looked at early versions of that and thought, what we did in Fairfield counts as what they wanted. So
okay, all right.
Yeah. So add more time on the response to the RFP if you can, and then add more time on the project.
So how much time do you think is realistic?
Well, I think this final deliverable December, you're adding 6 months. So just work back from June of next year.
Make it a year. Okay.
And Fairfield's in fiscal years, so I guess you probably want to end it in June anyway, right? So that way it works better.
Well, we may not be able to actually release the bid until July 1, depending on whether we're probably going to have to have funding before we can release the RFP.
Okay.
Well, Bill has verbally said he's going to find the money until it gets approved by appropriate bodies, which could take several months.
Right. So all the more reason to just push it out. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So we'll do a 1 year, July 1 to June 30th.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you'll just don't be surprised after that time passes if people want more time. It's happening a lot. Extensions are being requested. The underpass study is a good example, right? That was extended a few times.
And then the evaluation, I made that up again. What is an appropriate evaluation percentages? And is that something?
No, they were fine. I think this is what you'll see out there. Similar numbers.
Okay.
You might not want to say with deep because you might have some out-of-state firms, but unless that is important to you, actually, then leave it in there.
I actually, it was fairly low at 15%, but I actually, well, maybe we say experience in working with permitting bodies. I do kind of want them to have a deep lens on it, to be honest, because that's the way.
Then leave it.
Yeah.
Then leave it. You can say what you want here. This is your plan. So if you want it, leave it.
I mean, we're gonna have to get it approved. So
yeah,
anything they come up with has to be approved through DEEP. So.
Are you okay with this list of how to organize everything? Otherwise, you'll have 10 different.
Where would this go in there? This would just go in the.
I would just copy and paste these bullets right as they are.
And it would go into the anticipated deliverables in terms of the format.
Well, where it says, so after the sentence, proposals should include a detailed description of the approach, work plan, time frame, colon, and then just put this list, and they'll know that that's the order you want it in. So there'll be a technical part and there'll be a qualifications part. You don't need a separate fee, right? It's okay to be. It doesn't need to be in a separate envelope.
No, I don't think so. Does it?
No.
Then this is good. Just copy this right in. So when you review this, you'll see understanding, approach, work plan. So the people always ask me, what's the difference between the approach and the work plan? The approach just says in real plain words how you plan to do the project, and the work plan is the scope.
It's detailed, yeah.
Right. So the approach would say, like, we're choosing this kind of model because it's better, and then the work plan would just have the modeling task in it. Schedule proposed fees. So that would all be the technical part, and then the qualifications part. This is just my idea for you. And then I wasn't going to do it, but then I thought maybe prior experience in Fairfield would be helpful if you want it. So.
Okay. And the proposed fee, would we want to copy the language you used before in terms of, hourly rates requested by meetings and just.
Yeah, you could copy the same thing that we have up here. Exactly. Yeah. I can't find it now. Right. So lump sum fees, but show the buildup. So show the hours per task and the hourly rates that lead to those lump sum fees. And then for the meetings, the hourly.
Becky, are you saying to repeat that here?
Do we have to? Maybe we just say as per section, whatever we put it there. As per section 4.
As long as it's there. Mm-hmm.
4-5 or whatever, wherever it goes.
Yep.
Okay, no, that's good. All right, well, thank you. We are almost at the end, almost at 4. I think we have some good guidance here. Our next step is going to be to go back and make these edits. You're going to work on some sections that specifically the modeling sections. You want to come back with us, come back to us, and why don't I send you, if you're going to do a proposal for the GIS, why don't I send you what the student did so you know how far he got? Because you wouldn't have to recreate the wheel, you would just have to do the rest.
Okay, yeah, send me that, send me the Rhode Island proposal so I see what kind of modeling they had. I'm just curious. It's not going to affect this really. And then what's the time frame on this RFP? So you want to get this done this week, right?
Well, I mean, honestly, I was talking with the town and John Marsilio, and who basically was saying, we probably won't be allowed to issue this. Well, actually, you can tell me. Prue can tell us. We probably won't be allowed to issue this until we have approved the funding through all of our funding bodies.
See, but when you said that, I'm sitting here thinking, when the RTM approves the budget for next fiscal year, which starts July 1st, when it's approved, isn't that money then approved?
Well, I don't know how Bill's going to fund this. In other words, originally, I thought he and I had talked about taking the high intensity ARPA funds and giving them to this, but then he didn't do that. He took the ARPA funds and gave it all to paving. So we lost our ARPA funds that would have been resilience. So he implied that he may bond it. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I think whatever he is doing, I'll circle back with him and understand.
Because this would be capital. This is capital, not the budget not the operating budget that's being approved by RTM or was the other day.
If he bonds it, I think he can bond anything, right? I don't know.
I don't really know much about bonding, but
it's helpful if it's on the capital plan going forward, but you have to go and say Mother May I for each item.
Yeah.
I almost feel like that he said something at one of the meetings about where there might be ARPA money in other, like if something isn't shovel ready or, it's taking too long to get a project going, then there might be ARPA money, because the ARPA money has to be
Committed by this
it has to be
December.
committed by December and then spent by 26.
Which would be fine, because this will happen. I mean, for example, we don't know if 100% of the 3.2 Rooster River money will be actually committed and spent. So it may only be.
Yeah, and I think that's why they were taking the Rooster River money and putting it into paving, because they were thinking that there might be other ARPA money available, but.
But in any event, we need to get this into final shape, so if it sits on Adam Toolan's desk for a month and a half because he can't issue it because of the rules, then it sits there for a month and a half.
But at least,
ready to
but it
go.
takes a while to take this level of RFP, this revised version, and then turn it into a proper RFP, right? Because Adam's gonna have to take.
We'll just.
Don't you guys just do boilerplate and then this will be an attachment to the RFP?
Well, this is, we do the front end.
Yeah.
And then this is the scope, this is all that other stuff, and then we just make it one document.
Yeah.
Put it together.
All right, but I will try to get a sense of funding, and I'll
I think Dick's right.
My point is that purchasing is not going to edit.
No.
It'll just be an attachment.
Yes, I agree.
Well, it'll be part of the RFP.
Incorporated.
Yes, incorporated, yes. All right, well, this is.
And then I will work with you, Dave Offline, to make sure you have copies of all those documents that are listed in here, as they may or may not be of interest to you.
Okay.
Yeah, those would be attachments.
Or we would just have links.
No.
You would have links.
There's all gonna be links.
All right.
I think we should just, have a link to everything, because
Thanks.
to your point, some of this stuff is MetroCog documents and other things. No sense us recreating and having them on our site, if we can link to there. All right.
I will send you that Rhode Island proposal.
Okay,
That to you too.
great. All right.
Is there any other, well, there's no other business because we're a special called meeting, so we, are we ready to adjourn? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
We adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we are adjourning the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
See you later.